Hello and welcome everybody. Tanya here with New Earth Consciousness, and I'm live with Paula Scatoloni. She is a somatic therapist, sound healer, teacher, and guide. And I'm excited to dive into her work and what she does. And so welcome, Paula.
Thank you so much. It's lovely to see you again.
Yes, I'm really excited about this interview because when we did the pre-interview and you were talking about what you do when it comes to healing with song, it was definitely very intriguing because you were talking about something I've never heard anybody do. And then we did a session together. You gave me a full session of the healing with song that you do, and yeah, I was blown away. So we'll definitely get into that. But before we do, I really would love to hear what your journey has been, because you have a scientific background, like very academic. And then, through your I guess your awakening, your journey, your unfolding, you've kind of tapped into something that's very unique. So I'll let you take it away and talk about that.
Sure. I suppose I'm like a lot of therapists right now, psychotherapists, social workers who are opening their gifts and more using their intuition, using practices for healing that allow us to deepen and support others in many ways. So I come from the trauma healing community. And so I've been working with trauma in the body for many years. But my journey, if we look back at song and music, started in childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And this awareness that basically when any music plays, I move. I can't help. And I'm sure a lot of listeners, you're like that. It's just, you just have to move, right? There's something about sound and music that you have an affinity with. And so I think I was just one of those people where movement was a language for me, and sound and song and vibration. So my journey, like a lot of people as well, through adversity, caused me to awaken from a very young age and ask about the meaning of life and why are we here, and seek deeper answers within myself. And so, of course, eventually that led me to the field of psychotherapy, because that's you can spend all your time learning about yourself, right?
Yeah.
In school to become a therapist, and a lot of
Never-ending navel gazing.
Yeah, and we're wounded healers, most of us, right? Just trying to figure out ourselves along the way. So I've always been experiential. I lived in Hawaii for many years, where it's very open, right, to using alternative modalities and complementary medicine. And so, that's the path that I've been on for a while. And I've always leaned into experiential, ritual, body-based practices. I trained in somatic experiencing, some of the well-known methods that are out there that help us to understand ourselves through journeying and understand realms of consciousness, right? And that's a method where we go into the body to traverse consciousness, the subconscious, the transpersonal. So that is my background and my academic background. And so, my understanding is going to come from Jungian therapy and understanding of archetypes and the collective and how we hold and embody and move through the world based on those archetypes and those myths, but also how our physiology holds trauma and stress. And then because of my own healing around relational wounds, I became a specialist in understanding what's known as the attachment system, or your relational template.
Mhm.
And so my awakening has, probably mostly happened in the therapeutic realms, and my deepening of my understanding of self or core energy or connection to source. But along the way, around right before COVID, right before 2019, I had an experience, where trauma can be a catalyst for awakening. So I
Mhm.
had, someone pass away. And in my grief healing, I had an opening that occurred, and it opened me more to my multi-dimensional gifts.
Wow.
And yeah, so it was like, well, okay.
That's really interesting that grief was a doorway
Mhm.
to access that.
Yeah, it was a very specific experience of I was on a table processing because as somatic therapists, I go to get table work, right?
Mhm.
To bring me into the body because I know I'm frozen. And as I lied there, this pink light floated across the room and landed in my chest, and something cracked open, and all this grief poured out, and all this purple light poured in. So I shifted into a more transpersonal experience for a while, processing and being with these two energies, and then after that, started to realize that I could see and sense more from different pathways of knowing,
Mhm.
um, and that began more of my journey of moving into the healing arts, and beginning to speak to people who worked with energy or shamanic practices or methods of healing that were I had not explored yet.
Yeah. I'm curious about when you talk about when you just said, "I saw this pink light come into the room and the purple," uh, when that as that was happening, did you have a sense of what that was?
Yes. Well, the pink light was the client, the person that had passed away.
Mm.
So there was definitely her presence, or the essence of something that was her. Um,
Mm.
so it was a very sweet moment of reconnection
Mhm.
and peace. I was worried that she was not in peace because it happened so tragically,
Mm.
and so we were able to make a connection in that moment.
Mm.
And the purple, I'm still coming to understand, what that was or what that means, but it's there's many color frequencies I can see, and that's one of them.
Yeah, and I asked that because I've had, uh, clients like me personally, I have never seen colors like auras or anything like that, but sometimes when I'm doing table work, doing energy work with clients, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, like all these colors." And even first time people who've never experienced energy work say, "Oh, I saw this color and that color and even some shapes." And um, of course, I tell them, "Well, it's normal, like that happens." But they also, they're kind of in that going into the mind of like, what does that mean? Like, what is that? So I wanted to ask the question because I feel like sometimes there's moments when we have an understanding of something, like it's very clear, like we know because we just know that we know what it is. If it's
Mhm.
something, beyond ordinary experience, we have an understanding. But then there's moments when there are things that happen that we don't understand that maybe sometimes take maybe years to truly understand what that is.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
I agree. I think I'm still on my journey of understanding. One of the methods that I trained in is biofield tuning, which is
Mhm.
using tuning forks off the body. And in that method, we practice what's called deep listening. And in the deep listening, we open to information, as you're describing, right? And information comes in many forms. And
Mhm.
so for me, one of the pathways is seeing colors and then being with that information to see if there's more information that comes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So the tuning forks, and then you're also, you mentioned that you also work with the Akashic records. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So I'm just curious about the timeline sequence. So you were in psychotherapy. Like, what led you to the tuning forks and the Akashic records? Because that's something that, is not going to come with a degree in psychology, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, that experience of the grief and then the opening led me to my multidimensional gifts opened, and I began to see and sense more information. So
Mm,
that led me to seek a shaman practitioner who had been referred or vetted as someone reputable.
mhm,
And I began to ask questions and understand what it meant to work holotropically or with multi dimensions at the same time, because I was traversing multiple dimensions at once and I didn't understand what was happening. I wasn't afraid of it, but it was
yeah.
just a lot of information. So
Yeah.
trying to make sense. So I spent a year or two learning and practicing sound journeying, which is a shamanic practice of shifting into the right brain and traveling,
Mhm,
but also some of the ways of understanding ourselves and beyond, right? The 3D, a relationship with the natural world, a relationship to energy, and how we hold emotions energetically, right? Through the energy centers. And so I spent some time there, and that helped with some framework so I could continue to move forward. Now, I was already using sound because I had been using it as a psychotherapist, trained in a very specific acoustic frequency program developed by scientists. So it was using sound to influence the nervous system specifically. Although I had a sense that there was more happening even before I had cracked open and started to understand ourselves in a more complex way.
mhm,
So the sound program is a technology that's a vagal nerve stimulator, and that influences your social engagement system or your relational system, moving it out of threat into safety and supporting that process through cues, through the auditory pathway.
mm,
So that was already there. Then the awakening happened. Then I
mm,
moved to hanging out and getting support from those that were practicing more shamanic practices. And somehow things began to interface between those two worlds, and some ways of working that felt very natural to me, right?
mhm,
This pull to cultivating a connection to the earth, to creating healing circles, to starting to hold the space a little differently with those that I was using the sound with, um, to work with the subjective space between us, to influence that with my presence and with the group dynamic that I created for the journey. So we started to see an evolution in my work at that point. And then tuning forks were just emerging. I trained
mm,
in biofield tuning. So it was um, kind of a leaping off point for that organization. And so I wasn't at the very early, but I was kind of at in the middle stage of them bringing tuning forks into the forefront. And they're very scientifically based, right? She's
mm,
mapped the whole anatomy of the biofield, and she's
mm,
talking about quantum physics. And so of course I gravitate towards that to learn that. And I have to chuckle because most of the time I'm led to understand something, and then what ends up happening is I can see the commonality between the different modalities. And
mm.
so I could see, oh, that's exactly what I was doing with somatic therapy. I'm just doing it with tuning forks now. Talked about
Yeah.
it. So So that had repeated several times with different modalities that I would try out.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I also trained in Reiki because I began to, well, I probably need some methods of working that allow for self-care as well,
Mm-hmm.
and taking care of myself when I'm opening spaces for journeying. And so Reiki came into the picture, and the provider who trained me in that wrote a book on trauma therapy. So we start to see this evolution happening with trauma therapists where we're just broadening our toolbox essentially, right? Beyond the Western models.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank goodness.
Goodness.
I
Yeah.
just have to
They're
say
too
thank
small.
goodness.
They're too small. They're too small. So
Yeah.
here I am. I'm playing more and more. And I've always been a group facilitator. So most of this whole process, I've continued to explore, experiment, provide the sound in group settings with folks to create spaces for shared healing, to create community. But I also think it's more potent when we come
Yeah.
together. There's another element of healing that starts to happen in a group setting.
Yeah.
So that has led me to keep using the acoustic technology, but also start to soften into some other things that were emerging, which is what you ended up experiencing, which came from there was a long time where I would see a lot through the vision channel. And then at some point it shifted, and I had a few weeks of ringing in my ears. And then I wasn't able to see, but I started to be able to, my hearing like turned up to magnified. And so from that came, I would listen, I would sit across from people listening to the acoustic technology. They'd have a headset on, and I'd
Mhm.
start to hear song lyrics come in of the Beatles and James Taylor and Billy Joel. And it was very entertaining for me for at first. But then I started to write them down.
Yeah.
And then I thought, okay, I'm going to start to give them to people and see what happens. And
Mhm.
so the more I listened deeply, there was encouragement. Yes, let's give these and see what happens. So um, I've started to explore and think about the different ways that sound can heal. And sound bypasses the hippocampus. It goes straight to the limbic system. It takes us into our emotional processing center. And it allows us to get in touch with emotions that we may be keeping at bay in the subconscious. It
Mm.
also, works. I don't know if you've seen, I think we talked about those videos of somatics.
Mhm.
There, we vibrate a metal plate, a magnetic plate, and we watch the sand move around into different configurations. So when we're working with sound and vibration, there's this reorganizing happening, right, at a cellular level, multiple levels. And so I think for me, my learning curve is stepping out of the way and just trusting the music as it comes in and offering it like I did with you, and then seeing what happens to
Yeah.
support your journey.
Yeah. So, shall I share my experience?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, I just want the audience to know, like, what, as Paula's talking, like, I'm just going to say, Paula, like, you're very understated. Like, what you shared with me blew me away. I had no idea what to expect. So when you said, "Yeah, I channel in songs, and they're given to me by my guides and your guides, and we listen to the songs," and I thought, "Yeah, okay, sure, yeah, I'm up for it. Let's see what it is." And my experience, you kind of created a space. We kind of went through this little journey of finding a peaceful place in nature and going there within my mind and allowing myself to lay down and relax and receive. And then you started to play the songs. Now, like, my experience was like, with the first one, and I can't remember which one it was, but it was like a song from the 80s that I remember, and it might have been from I don't know if it was from Flashdance or
It
was
was.
that where it's from? Oh my
Yeah.
god, that was, like, my first tape that I ever had. When I got my first stereo,
Mm.
Flashdance was one of them, and I was just like, "Oh," and I remember singing that song all the time, and I was like, "Oh, wow, I know every single word to this song, and I have not heard it in decades, right?" And so
Mm.
I'm, like, going back and I'm remembering that song, and I remember thinking in my mind, like, "Why did I love this song so much?" You know? And I'm listening to the words, and I'm kind of, like, dropping in, going deeper and deeper, and what was so fascinating is that each song that played, um, it wasn't that it so much brought a memory, because that doesn't adequately describe it. It's like it was multidimensional. Um, there were moments when, for example, I think the song was Unforgettable. Unforgettable, you know that one? So and listening to that, it brought me to, um, past boyfriends and what it was like there were messages coming through that weren't necessarily words, but they were feelings, and I was like as I was listening to the song, I was like, "Oh, that's how they experienced me." That's was the knowing that came through, and it was like, for someone that's had a lifelong pattern of low self-esteem, I was like, "Oh, wow, really? I had that impact?" Like, there was a healing there that happened of just like, "Oh, I kind of, I don't see myself clearly, obviously." Um, and then it's, then traveling through, there was this experience of, my parents, and seeing them as a young couple with small children, with me and my brother, and just being in life and having dreams and desires and trying to grow a family together and all the difficulties and the problems and the issues and the misunderstandings. And yet there was this like really this innocence and purity of love between them that, couldn't quite withstand, everything that they came with. And it was very moving. So it just kept going deeper and deeper into the of like opening of the heart and seeing places in my life from a different perspective. And and then it went on to you know, connecting with my husband and how he sees me and, the kind of there was a sense of humor too that came through, a sense of humor and it was a little bit there was kind of if you're I guess if your guides are like they have a sense of humor, obviously, like with this one song, like it was very it was eye-opening, but in a very funny, kind of silly way, which also helped me to have a deeper appreciation for my partner. And and then there was, connection with my two children, and each song was specific to them of what and it wasn't that and it all happened very spontaneously. There wasn't me trying to do anything or try to conjure anything or be like, "Okay, I'm gonna work on my whatever, my childhood issues, or I'm gonna work on my relationship with my partner." It just happened, and there was something yeah, what I found really interesting was just how different each of the songs were. Like you had said, like, it was definitely over many different types of genre, like the '80s to, what sounded like earlier, music to, music from my high school days, and, each one yeah, and then it was just such an emotional, like, cathartic experience for me. I feel like I'm definitely still integrating it. Um, but it was definitely not what I expected, and in a way, it was kind of like it was very psychedelic in the way how, like, psychedelics can open you up and help you to access different emotions. Um, it was like that, but without that influence. It was very natural, very like the music. did something on its own, and yeah, it just brought about such a sense of deep love, um, for myself and for others, compassion for myself. It was, and I think what was surprising to me was that I didn't realize that those emotions were there, that were inside my body, that I, we, and we talked about how mental our world is, and being an adult, we're always in this, we're always strategizing and figuring out and trying to see, like, well, how can we manipulate things to get what we want, it's so strong, the ego, I guess. And what this experience to me felt like, of just coming back home to what it actually really means to be human, of just like that heart, the emotions, the um, allowing ourselves to feel, so that we're feeling more alive. I think a lot of us walk around, we know we all have this desire to feel more alive, but I feel like the mind, or maybe the left brain, is so strong, because that's what the current culture is supporting, essentially. Um, we're kind of going around kind of numbed out, just going through the list and accomplishing things and whatever, our to-dos. And this was really a beautiful experience. So first of all, I have to say thank you so much, and definitely interested in your group offerings. But is what Mike, would you say that, I mean, I would imagine that each person's experience is unique, but is there like a common sort of outcome or result that people receive from this kind of work?
Well, some of what you're tapping into is one, not to be cliche, but
Mhm.
the idea, like, because everybody's got Rumi on their website right now, but
Yeah.
this idea of you know, our work is not to our work is to remove all the obstacles to love, right?
Yeah.
So I think at some level that is what this is tapping into, whether it's self-love or love for other, and a lot of that has to do with perspective and how we hold on to our pain.
Mm,
So the songs get in there to give us perspective of what's keeping us locked in our pain and our narrative,
mm,
right? And when we can shift that and open that, there's a softening and a flow and an allowing, right, of something
mhm.
else to come in.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that the things that happened to us weren't bad. It just means that when we're holding on and not allowing that to shift into something different, that energy that's used for the holding on can't be recruited for the present moment and for our life force and for our vitality and for our aliveness, right? So that's the opening that comes with letting go and feeling those emotions, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's more of me here now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I
Mhm.
think that's what you're tapping into. And so whether that pathways, plant medicine, breath work, somatics, sound, all of these practices help us to resolve inner conflict, right? That keeps us out of our authentic self, which the authentic self is love. Right? So what are the practices?
So simple, but it's so complicated for us for some reason, or complex, I guess I should say. It really is. I mean, it is, like you said, like, all you need is love. Yeah, like, I bet you get that song sometimes. Uh,
I've never had that song. I
no?
have a lot of Beatles. I have a lot of Beatles, but I don't have that song.
Oh, I love this so much. It's definitely, yeah, and I felt so, so held too. So, when we were talking before, you said like, this is not a sound bath. And I would have to agree. I mean, I give sound baths, I do crystal singing bowls and that whole thing. And I play the harmonium and I sing and people love it. They're like, oh, that was so lovely. This is something else, definitely something else. And I know like you're still kind of like in that process of like, obviously this work is coming through you and you're like, yeah, I still don't know quite how to describe it. And yeah, I would have to agree. I don't know quite how to describe it. It's definitely, multidimensional. It's definitely, for me, my experience was like showing me in a way, even karmic contracts or, uh, realizing like, oh yeah, I've been with this person for many lives. We're tethered through many lives and the love that is there over, lifetimes is really, really profound. And it's like, I think it opens us up to realizing like, yeah, you are so much more than this physical body, this personality, um, this particular life. Like there's just, it's vast. And I think, like you said, that's why psychology is too narrow. It's not big enough to hold the immensity of who we actually are as souls, and like what's going on here. you
Way
know,
more complex, way
yeah,
more complex than
yeah.
we. But the piece that will tie us back to the Akashic is
Mm,
when healing happens in the Akashic, it is about gaining perspective.
mm,
That's what the Akashic does for us, gives us different views. Sometimes you or someone listening will literally be up looking down or from the side or in this position, right? To get new perspectives around the story. So we go back
mm,
to the story, right? Because we live based on our story and our ego creates our story.
mm.
So what happens when we start to look at different perspectives is we can't be an ego anymore,
Right. Yeah,
right?
right. And the music helps us to kind of, yeah, untether or begin to unwind from those hardwired stories that we've been or viewpoints that we've been holding and opening up to a different. Yeah, it's like the elephant, right? The blind men trying to describe the elephant. It's like, yeah, it's all the elephant, but each person is like, oh, well, the elephant's rough and hairy, and oh, well, the elephant's actually really, I don't know, skinny if it's holding the tail, like. So, yeah, that's interesting. So I want to ask you, so this music, the songs that are coming through, they are tethered to the Akashic somehow, this connection.
Yes, yes. And I had gone on to do a class on the Akashic. I think regardless of whether I had the class or not, that's where they're coming from. But at least
Mhm,
I began to understand it. And I had already had a glimpse of it because in somatic work, that's what we're doing, but we're just going through the body. So there's different ways to get in through Reiki, through
mhm,
meditation, through somatics, through certain
mhm,
prayers.
mhm,
Um, but I do think of that as being a very clean place in terms of information coming, this accuracy to that is coming from a place where there's no ego and it's coming from my hope would be connecting you to your soul self, right?
mhm,
So that information is coming from there, right? So we're
mhm.
lining up that pathway so it's more clear. And often in the journey, that's the experience of getting the information, you as the participant, you know, direct download from your higher self, right? From your ways of knowing, deeper ways of knowing, so you can put the pieces together in in the ways that you're doing, or did during the listening.
Yeah, 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 fascinating. And you also kind of touched upon like, why is song so powerful? And do you want to talk about that? Like how these songs, why these songs are powerful, and where's, as an artist, I feel like artists in general channel. They
Yes.
channel.
Yes.
Maybe they don't call it that, but that's definitely, I feel like, what's happening. I remember, I think Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love,
Mhm.
and one of her books, she talked about how she was going to write a book, and she got a download for the story, and it was about a doctor living in Brazil who encounters whatever. She had the whole thing just like dropped in, and somehow through coincidence, I don't know if it was a friend or somebody that she connected with, and they said, "Oh yeah, I'm going to write this book, and here's the story." It was the exact same story. The exact same, like Brazil, the doctor, female doctor, like whatever.
Mm.
Maybe slight subtleties of difference, but basically the same. And it's like, okay, obviously, when we're connected with the muse, whatever that means, which is kind of a mysterious thing, we're we're downloading, we're tapping into things. So
Mhm.
seems like songs have that same quality. And would you say that's the same? It's probably not the same of all songs, though. Would you say?
I don't, well, here's the way I've been holding it. Because I've heard Bonnie Raitt, I've heard Chris Martin talk about they're just there and I grab them and pull them down. So
Yeah.
I do think there's a morphic field of song lyrics or some, poetry, right?
Yeah.
That's what songs are, poetry. And so, but I also think that songs have their mathematical equations. That's what I'm playing with now. That
Mhm.
there's also, some element of understanding how things come together that's very scientific. I'm not a composer or a musician, right?
Mhm.
That's also in that as well. And so we have the song lyrics aspect of it, artist, we have the mathematical aspect of it. And
Mm.
yeah, it comes through that channel of that artist. And then they intertwine it with their own, knowledge of what they're bringing as musicians. But recently, the Indigo Girls were speaking on a documentary about that we don't write them; they're not ours. They're
Mm.
collective experiences that
Mm.
you are experiencing with us.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So we step into the shared field with the music.
Yeah.
We go
That's
from
yeah, that's so moving. That's really beautiful. I think you're really right about when people come together to experience music, or in your case, it's like this with the intention for healing. Like, not, when people go to a concert, they aren't necessarily thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna go see the Indigo Girls so I can heal my childhood wounds," or whatever, Like, they're just going because they love the Indigo Girls, and perhaps there are moments when they're deeply moved, I've definitely have had that experience when the music is, like, just right. It's like, "Wow, I am just, like, blown away."
Mm.
Um, but it seems like to me, with the work that you're doing, and you're bringing a group of people together with this deeper, like this deeper understanding of what it is that you're creating. You know, you're not just sitting listening to music. We're all listening to music in the radio and all this stuff, Spotify, whatever. But with this, it's like it's very specific, and that's what I want people to understand. It's like it's because of your connection with the spiritual world and the communication that you have when you're receiving, like, okay, I'm going to do this song and then this song and this, like, there is it's almost, to me, it seems like almost like a pharmacy, right? Like, I'm going to take this medicine, and then this medicine needs to be applied, and then this medicine. It's very much has intention, but you also said like you're not like each one is unique. So it's not like, oh, well, in order to heal, heartache, it's always going to be this song, and this song, right? It's much more nuanced and multi-layered and subtle, and yeah, and you even described like there's times when you're like, I don't even know why this song is coming through. Like, I don't understand. I'm just being told this is the song that's to be played, right?
Yeah. Sometimes unusual songs that I don't want to give people.
Yeah, you're like, no, I don't want to give them that one.
But I will say there are a few that have been tracking 4 of the 5 years or the 3 years. Well,
Yeah.
it's about 4 years, I would say, that are consistent. And there's a piece of this I haven't explained yet, and
Mm,
I'm not going to get too complicated, but in biofield tuning, we're taught to stand 5 feet off of the body and to engage with the outside of the biofield. Your biofield is your energetic field, right? It's like an egg. And so as you come up with your tuning fork and you click in, you hit the edge of the field. But before you hit the field, like your personal field,
mhm,
I would be in the collective field
mm,
at the time of your birth.
mm,
And then or the time of conception. And then I click in with the fork, and then I'm in the uterine experience. So it's a timeline that goes across this way.
mm,
And, I have been playing with the possibility that songs and certain songs are collective experiences during a particular timeline in
mm,
history
mm,
that capture certain archetypal patterns in our collective. And so in the groups I run, there are a handful, 10 or 12, that are consistently there, no matter who's in the group.
mm,
And so those are the ones that I'm hanging out and exploring a little bit more and thinking about, well, what are they saying? What are they
mm,
talking about? What's the message there? Sometimes they'll be about war. Sometimes they'll be about dynamics in the collective in terms of how we social structures, gender
mm,
structures, or constructs, right, that are embedded in our
mm.
collective consciousness. So I think there's a potential for it to be both personal and collective.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing. So, so yeah, share with us how people can find you. What are your offerings right now?
Sure. So my website is www.paulascatoloni.com, and that usually will give you the up to date of what I'm offering individually and groups. I do enjoy the groups and have several usually happening at the same time. Some are for providers themselves that are interested in sound and
Mm,
they like to experience it themselves and talk about sound healing. And then others are for people in the community that are consciousness seekers and people who are interested in their own healing. So I have some coming up this spring for both, and they're 7-week groups. So they're intensive immersions, I would say. Some
mhm.
people say it's like doing a year of therapy in 7 weeks.
Wow.
It can be very intense.
Yeah.
But I have created a course that goes with it. And the course allows you to deepen into your journey of your relational template, I would say. And because I'm a somatic provider, I talk about the somatic scaffolding of your relational template, which we can find in some of the movement patterns that are there in the first year of your life as an infant.
Mm,
And you can explore those patterns and how your relationship to them. And so there's some psychology in there, some journal prompts, somatic meditations, and I think a pretty good overview of how we are either organized in safety or threat.
mm,
And again, that idea when we're recruited when we're recruiting our energy for threat because we don't feel like we belong or we don't feel safe, that energy, that life force energy is not available then for our vitality and our creativity, our inspiration, right? And so, so there's some teachings there to help open up people's language around the relationship with themselves and their physiology.
Mm. Yeah, beautiful. Amazing. Paula, this has been such a pleasure. There's so much here that we could go on and on about, but we're gonna tie it up here. And yeah, I just really encourage everyone to check out Paula's work. Please go to her website. Yeah, your 7-week intensive sounds amazing. And yeah, I just thank you so much for being here and for doing the work that you do and being willing to be the revolutionary visionary. I mean, it takes when you know, I feel like we're at a time right now where those of us that are willing to go beyond the confines of certain constructs and are willing to explore new areas of dimensions of healing, because it's needed, right? Like we're willing to expand our consciousness and bring forth new technologies. So thank you
Yes.
so very much.
Thank you for your podcast. And I knew listening to your podcast that it was a conversation that was going to be good. I really appreciate the guests that you bring on and what you're offering as well. So
Yeah,
thank you
thank you.
for sharing.
Thank you so much. Yes, please like and subscribe, people. Let's build this channel up.
Yes.
And yes, and yeah, beautiful. So thank you so much. Thanks to those who are watching or have watched the replay. Any questions, you can type them in the chat. Reach out to Paula, reach out to me. And yeah, have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks, Paula.
Thank you. Thank you.